Hey, welcome to the How to Podcast series. It's November, and it's National Podcast Post Month. What we're doing here is we're going to do an episode a day, every day, for the month of November on the How to Podcast series. And instead of being a bunch of Dave for 30 days in a row, how about a bunch of my best friends and podcast family from the How to Podcast series coming back, reuniting. It's like a family reunion, everyone. And over the next 30 days, you're going to hear from some of the best podcasters in the world. So excited to have them return and share their insights to 3 questions that you as a podcaster should consider. You get their combined experiences over 30 episodes to help you plan your podcast, grow your show, launch a show, continue as a podcaster. We're all here for you. And so here are some of your best friends returning again to share their insight, their wisdom. These spectacular people are here for you. I'm so proud to have them back. To hear their voices again makes me happy. So let's get going. Happy National Podcast Post Month. Here we go.
Hello, Dave. And to my fellow listeners and guests of the How to Podcast series podcast, welcome to this episode. Dave, I can't thank you enough for the invitation, and I hope you all are enjoying NaPodPoMo, the National Podcast Promotion Month this November. This is Eric Seemann, coming to you from the Texas Hill Country outside San Antonio, Texas. My podcast, or I need to say our podcast, which I do with my real-life sibling and sister, is Real Siblings, It Ain't Easy. Both my sister, Donna and I happen to be professional real estate agents. Together, we produce a bi-monthly podcast syndicating through our host on the 16th and the 28th of every month. In our podcast, we blend real estate together with lifestyle as we seek to communicate, educate, connect, and entertain our listeners. We endeavor to better equip our community of listeners for their next real estate transaction. All the episodes are available at our website, realsiblings.com, and they are also available on all major podcast platforms and on YouTube. And when they're on YouTube, you can get the video, which is very raw with minimal editing and with static image format. Once again, thanks, Dave, for the invite. Thanks for listening. Now let's dive into this episode of the How to Podcast series. For these episodes, Dave provided us as co-hosts, guest hosts, co-hosts, guest hosts, specific questions he wanted us to try to address. So question 1, what strategies do you recommend for identifying and engaging with your audience? Okay, full disclosure, which is a huge thing in real estate. Disclose, disclose, disclose. When my sister and I began to kick around the idea of a podcast in late 2021, all we had was a raw idea. We didn't begin our podcast journey thinking, I'm going to be the next big thing, or we're going to be the next big thing. For us, it was simply another channel to possibly generate some leads and business. Neither of us had any idea what we were doing, where this was going, how long it would last. We didn't have a plan for production, and we didn't have the tools. Maybe perhaps equipment and software is a better way to describe that. What we had was an idea, and for my sister and I, we had no fear. So in May of 2022, we sat down at a family reunion and recorded our very first episode. Since that first episode, which published on June 16th of 2022, we have grown, refined our message, and built an audience of faithful listeners. Once we launched, we quickly determined that we needed a website. I registered the domain, and you can see we didn't even include the word podcast, which I found out afterwards many podcasts use. And then we worked with someone to build our website. Basic, but in today's world, from a strategy standpoint and a single landing page for engagement, I believe the website is critical. If you are a regular listener of the How to Podcast series, Dave frequently speaks about visiting his website howtopodcast.ca. Haha! CA, because he's in Canada. It is a primary pathway to engagement with his listeners. Our personal contact information is on the website, including emails and social media accounts. We receive much of our interaction from messaging services and from phone calls. Bottom line, you have to have the channels, portals, and platforms that allow your listeners to reach you by the channel that they are most comfortable with. Channel, mechanism, platform, service, I don't know which word you want to pick in there. Treat others as you wish to be treated is commonly referred to as the golden rule. In podcasting, I have found the platinum rule to be more important. Treat others as they wish to be treated. This takes the focus off of you, the host, and places it onto your listeners or audience. They need to be comfortable with reaching out. Remember, ultimately, this is about them, your audience of listeners, and not just about you or us. So if you're getting into this amazing space of podcasting and content creation, you have to ensure that you are accessible to your audience and that they have multiple avenues. That's an homage to real estate avenues. I hope you all got the joke. To reach out with feedback, questions, and connecting with you, their new best friend. Question 2. Can you describe a challenge that you have faced recently in your podcasting journey and how you overcame it? Well, for our format and podcast, our most consistent challenge is scheduling. My sister, as my co-host, and I are both incredibly busy. We live across 2 time zones in the United States, which, because my sister is in Arizona, sometimes that means it's a 2-hour time difference or a 1-hour time difference, depending on the season and the time of year. As I record the content today, here in the U.S., we will be setting our clocks back for the big fall back in a couple of weeks. So scheduling around our flexible, and I hope you could hear the air quotes there, is always a challenge. We agreed during a recent face-to-face recording and discussion that we need to set a specific day of the month and time that works for both of our schedules to batch record at least 2 episodes. Because of the nature of our business and podcast, trying to batch record more episodes is a challenge, as the real estate industry is very dynamic and ever-changing. Recent national events and litigation here in the United States against the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, will continue to have ripples. That is from my friend and fellow U.S. Army vet and podcaster JJ, hey JJ, for months to come. Our topics always vary, remaining responsive enough in our content to keep up to date and evergreen is an opportunity and a challenge. So for us, as co-hosts, separated by distance and time zones, this will remain a challenge. Balancing that in conjunction with trying to be responsive to our industry and our audience and give them the best and most up-to-date information makes batch recording a challenge, but something we're ready to tackle. Once you add in our occasional guest, the complexity naturally gets exponentially more challenging. Our episode 26 from season 2, we had 4 guests and 2 hosts. Our guests were all in Ohio. I'm in Texas. My sister's in Arizona. We were across 3 time zones, all of those different states. It's a great episode to listen to when it comes to our podcast. Sound is not perfect, but the human stories and link to our hometown in Lindsay, Ohio, just resonate with listeners. Don't be afraid to stretch it. It will ultimately result in growth for yourself as a host and for your podcast. And so now, on to question 3. What tools or resources do you find indispensable for your podcast planning, production, and promotion? So for this question, I kind of touched on planning already. I'm going to address primarily production on this one. So with our idea and concept, use a production term, in the can, we dove into the world of podcasting headfirst and ended up ankle deep. For episode 1, season 1, we had a laptop and a video phone, and our voices. We pressed play or record, and our journey began. Prior to our launch, I had completed most of the research, and again, there's those air quotes, utilizing information from the podcast, which at the time I listened to most frequently, called Stay Paid, produced by Reminder Media. The co-hosts Luke Akery and Josh Steik produce a plethora of content, and based on just 2 episodes of well over 400 now, I had everything we needed. Well, except for, okay, there's a pause there. This is a long list. We have never shied away from video. That's number 1. Didn't even know that not being on video was a thing in the podcast world. Because of this, even when together we record on Zoom. My co-host, sister, without doing any editing, post the video to our primary YouTube channel. I take that video, spend hours, yes, hours per episode, acting as our editor and producer. We knew we could record on Zoom. However, we did not know that to edit Zoom audio, the file format had to be converted first. Enter the first piece of new software. Movavi, hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yes, it's free. Video and audio editor. I had to learn the basics to upload a Zoom audio file, adjust the settings to convert and save to an MP3 format that I can use to edit utilizing Audacity. Once again, Audacity is free. You've heard Dave talk about it regularly for our production of final episodes. I had to teach myself to use Audacity, and I learned new features and settings every episode. So I consider this a work in progress. For me, editing Audacity, once the file is converted to an MP3, takes 3 versions. Version 1 is the raw file with basic edits. I run a loudness normalize for the whole file, and then I start cleaning it up. Oh, by the way, I did not learn how to effectively normalize the file until I was well over 14 episodes into our podcast journey. When we went back through and edited how the episodes are syndicated, I decided that 2022 would become Series 1, and it's episodes 1 through 14 since we produced June through December of that year. This basic file, once editing is completed, is exported and brought into version 2, which is for adding into the intro and outro, teaser, and our theme songs. Once again, once that version 2 is finished, I export one more time, bring it into a new file, and run compression settings, limiting, and final amplification for what I refer to as the CLA. All this took, well, as of today, 2.5 years of production, and I still have problems. My most recent episode we posted, for whatever reason, on my side, it looked like I had a 30 to 35 minute episode, but what actually played was about 9 minutes. So I had to go back into the software that day after I had listened to my own episode, and that's why we listened to one of the reasons we listen to our episodes, and resolve the problem going back through each of these 3 versions of files in order to get a full finished version of episode 56. Along the way, I've had various instructors via podcasts, including Dave Jackson, Daniel J. Lewis, and primarily our host, Dave Campbell of the How to Podcast series. I am also fortunate to have an amazing supporting cast. Number 1 is my fabulously talented wife, Jeannie, who has taken great pics with just a mobile phone camera, and as I have learned to edit in several photo platforms, including Canva, basic subscription paid for this software, and Snapseed, mobile app on my phone, I have produced all of our artwork for our episodes. We have added USB mics for our computers to improve recording, and I continue to learn how to efficiently upload audio, images, podcasts, basic information, and to interact with our hosts, Liberated Syndication, or Libsyn, which has worked well for us as a host utilizing a basic monthly subscription. Bottom line, it is not one thing, I wish it was, that's a piece of equipment or a software or anything else. It is a series of hardware improvements, software enhancements, family support, And this is critical. If you listen to our podcast, you'll find that our introduction episode or introduction to each episode is Caleb Reed, my youngest nephew, Donna's youngest son, recording. Music is by second oldest son, Adam Reed. And we close every episode with our granddaughter, my granddaughter, recording the final outro and call to action. Bottom line, it takes a family to make this thing work. So that's it. Thanks for investing your valuable time to join us and listen today to the How to Podcast series. I especially need to say thanks to Dave, the host of the How to Podcast series. He works tirelessly, yeah, there's one more time of those air quotes, to produce his 8 shows. Yes, 8. Connect with his growing podcast community around the world, encourage and offer his advice and services to each and every one of his listeners and audience members. Come on, who else would give up the mic to a guest host for an entire episode of what could ultimately be rubbish content? While I'm sure Dave is going to be adding some closing comments to this episode. Oh, and by the way, thanks for the shout out, Dave, in episode 309. Yes, I heard it. It made me laugh while I was driving. Put a big smile on my face. I know Dave values your continued listening and he covets your engagement. If you have made it to this point, wait for the wrap up from Dave. For me, I hope you enjoyed listening. And as I always close the show I do with my real sibling, remember, it may be simple. It ain't always easy. I'm Eric, she's Donna, and we are real siblings. Bye, y'all.
Well, there you go. That's Eric. What a guy, right? Like, if you want to meet the best people in the world, like I'm talking like the best people, the people that change your life, start a podcast. To have somebody like Eric that listens to the show and finds value in what we do here, and then to take time to do this for us, podcasting is the best thing ever. So if you want to meet the best people in the world, you want to grow your community, you want to have interaction with people from around the world, then start a podcast. We need you to start your show. And you can start with what you have and learn as you go. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the best of the best of the best. You don't have to spend a ton of money. And you can shoehorn this into your busy schedule. Podcasting is the best thing ever. I don't know if you got on yet, but podcasting is the best thing ever. And if you've been hesitant in starting, you're like, follow Eric's lead, follow Donna's lead, start your show. If you have any questions about podcasting, you're in the right spot. This is the How to Podcast series. That's Eric. I'm Dave. And you found the right podcast for you to grow your show, start a show, continue with your show, and to meet amazing people like Eric. This is the right place for you. This is the How to Podcast series. Eric, thank you so much. Everybody, go listen to his show. You know what to do. Links in the show notes. Thanks for listening. It's amazing. We'll talk on the next episode. Take care. Thanks, Eric.